The pungent scent of human pheromones hits the Denobulan atmosphere like an invisible shockwave. Ambassador Caleb Warren steps off the shuttle, his polished boots touching alien soil for the first time. He's barely taken 3 steps when the first guard drops. Thud, thud, thud. One by one, the elite Denobulan Royal Guards collapse, their bodies hitting the ground in rapid succession. Caleb freezes, his security detail tenses, hands hovering over weapons. The diplomatic mission, Earth's chance at vital resources for interstellar expansion, teeters on the brink of disaster before it's even begun. Queen Lyra of Denobula rushes forward, her ornate robes billowing behind her. Her eyes, wide with alarm, dart between her fallen guards and the human delegation. "What is the meaning of this?" she demands, her melodic voice edged with steel. Caleb raises his hands, palms out. "Your Majesty, I assure you, we mean no harm. We're as confused as you are." Denobulan medical staff swarm the scene, scanning devices whirring. A chief medic approaches the Queen, his face a mask of bewilderment. It's a hormonal overload, Your Majesty, triggered by..." He glances at Caleb, hesitation clear in his eyes. "Spit it out," the Queen commands. "By the human's natural pheromones, Your Majesty." A ripple of shock passes through the gathered Denobulans. Whispers of chemical weapons and biological attack reach Caleb's ears. He feels sweat beat on his forehead, the gravity of the situation weighing heavily on his shoulders. Queen Lyra's gaze locks onto Caleb, a mix of suspicion and curiosity in her alien eyes. "Ambassador Warren, you will come with me. Now." As they walk towards the palace, more guards collapse in their wake. The remaining Denobulans give Caleb a wide berth, eyeing him with a mixture of fear and fascination. The human ambassador's mind races, searching for a diplomatic solution to this biological crisis. Inside the palace, chaos erupts. Staff members faint as Caleb passes. The Queen's advisors argue in hushed, urgent tones. Words like quarantine and interstellar incident float through the air. "Lock down the palace," Queen Lyra orders. "No one enters or leaves until we understand this phenomenon." Caleb finds himself ushered into a hastily prepared isolation chamber. Through a transparent barrier, he watches Denobulan scientists scurry about, collecting data and running tests. The fate of human-Denobulan relations hangs in the balance, all because of his scent. As night falls on the alien world, Caleb sits alone in his sterile room. The weight of Earth's future presses down on him. He must find a way to control his effect on the Denobulans, to salvage the trade negotiations, to prevent an interstellar incident. And then there's Queen Lyra. Despite the crisis, Caleb can't shake the memory of her intense gaze, the way she seemed drawn to him even as chaos unfolded around them. He pushes the thought aside. Inter-species relationships are the last thing he should be considering right now. Outside his room, human and Denobulan authorities work tirelessly to unravel the mystery of Caleb's potent pheromones. Inside, the ambassador prepares for the most challenging diplomatic mission of his life, one where his very biology might be the key to success or the catalyst for failure. As dawn broke over the alien landscape, Caleb paced his isolation chamber, the events of the previous day replaying in his mind. The transparent barrier that separated him from the bustling Denobulan scientists felt more like a prison wall with each passing hour. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. The door slid open, revealing a slender Denobulan woman in a pristine lab coat. Her large, expressive eyes studied Caleb with a mixture of scientific curiosity and caution. "Ambassador Warren," she said, her voice melodious yet professional. "I'm Dr. Zara, head of the xenobiology team assigned to your case." Caleb nodded, keeping his distance. "Doctor, I hope you have some answers. This situation is unprecedented." Dr. Zara's lips curved into a small smile. "Indeed it is, Ambassador. We've never encountered a species whose natural pheromones have such a profound effect on our physiology. It's both alarming and fascinating." She gestured to a chair. "Please, sit. We have much to discuss." As Caleb settled into the seat, Dr. Zara began explaining the battery of tests they had planned. Blood samples, skin swabs, and even a full-body scan were on the agenda. Caleb listened intently, his diplomat's mind already calculating the potential outcomes of this scientific scrutiny. Hours blurred into days as Caleb became the subject of intense study. He endured countless tests, each one bringing the denobulans closer to unraveling the mystery of his potent pheromones. Through it all, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was more lab rat than ambassador. On the third day of his confinement, an unexpected visitor arrived. Queen Lyra swept into the room, her regal presence filling the space. Despite the protective suit she wore, her beauty was undeniable. "Ambassador Warren," she said, her voice slightly muffled by the suit's audio system, "I hope you're being treated well." Caleb bowed slightly. "Your Majesty, I'm grateful for your hospitality under these unusual circumstances." The Queen's eyes crinkled with amusement. "Unusual indeed. I've come to inform you that we'll be continuing our diplomatic discussions, albeit in a more controlled environment." And so began a series of meetings unlike any in the history of interstellar diplomacy. Queen Lyra and Caleb, separated by a thin barrier, delved into discussions of trade agreements and cultural exchange. Yet as the days passed, their conversations began to drift beyond politics. "Tell me, Ambassador," Queen Lyra said during one such meeting, her eyes bright with curiosity, "what is Earth like? I've seen images, but I want to hear it from someone who calls it home." Caleb found himself describing the rolling hills of his childhood home, the bustling cities that never slept, the vast oceans that covered much of his planet's surface. As he spoke, he noticed the Queen leaning closer, her breath fogging the barrier between them. "It sounds beautiful," she said softly, a hint of longing in her voice. Caleb felt a flutter in his chest, a feeling he quickly suppressed. This was no time for personal entanglements, no matter how intriguing he found the Denobulan monarch. Meanwhile, beyond the walls of Caleb's isolation chamber, Dr. Zara and her team worked tirelessly. Their breakthrough came on a quiet evening, as the twin moons of Denobula cast their ethereal glow over the capital city. "It's the Telor receptor," Dr. Zara exclaimed, her eyes wide as she studied the holographic display. "The human pheromones are triggering a response in a receptor that's been dormant in our species for millennia." Her team gathered around, murmuring in excitement. The Telor receptor, they explained to a baffled Caleb via video link, was a relic of an ancient Denobulan mating ritual. Over time, as their society evolved, the receptor had become inactive, until now. As news of the discovery spread, so did the political backlash. Senator Krell, a staunch traditionalist, called for an emergency session of the Denobulan High Council. "We cannot allow these humans to reawaken primitive instincts in our people," he thundered from the council chamber. "They must be sent away for the safety and purity of our society." Queen Lyra watched the political storm brewing with growing concern. During her next meeting with Caleb, her usual composure was noticeably strained. "Ambassador," she said, her voice low and urgent, "I fear we're running out of time. Senator Krell and his faction are pushing for your immediate deportation." Caleb leaned closer to the barrier, his voice equally hushed. "Your Majesty, there must be something we can do. The alliance between our worlds is too important to abandon." The Queen's eyes met his, and for a moment the air seemed to crackle with unspoken tension. "There might be a way," she said slowly. "Dr. Zara believes she can develop a neutralizing agent to counteract the effects of your pheromones on our people." Caleb's heart raced at the implications. "That's excellent news," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "When can we begin trials?" Queen Lyra took a deep breath, her next words causing Caleb's world to tilt on its axis. "We can't wait for extensive trials. I've decided to undergo the treatment myself, as a show of good faith to my people and to Earth." Caleb stared at her, speechless. The risk she was taking, both personally and politically, was enormous. And yet, as he looked into her determined eyes, he felt a surge of admiration, and something deeper, something he dared not name. As preparations for the Queen's treatment began, Caleb found himself torn. The diplomat in him knew this was their best chance at salvaging the mission and preventing an interstellar incident. But another part of him, a part he'd been trying to ignore, mourned the potential loss of the connection he felt with Queen Lyra. The day of the treatment arrived, marked by a palpable tension throughout the palace. Caleb watched through a view screen as Queen Lyra entered the medical chamber, her head held high despite the whispers of disapproval from some of her advisors. Dr. Zara approached with a syringe containing a shimmering, opalescent liquid. As she administered the experimental agent, Caleb held his breath, acutely aware that the fate of human denobulin relations, and perhaps something far more personal, hung in the balance. The shimmering liquid coursed through Queen Lyra's veins, her body tensing as the experimental agent took effect. Caleb watched through the view screen, his breath held as Dr. Zara monitored the Queen's vital signs. Minutes passed, feeling like hours. Finally, Dr. Zara's face broke into a cautious smile. "Your Majesty, how do you feel?" Queen Lyra blinked, her eyes focusing on the doctor. I feel different. Clearer, somehow." Caleb's heart raced as the Queen turned towards the view screen, her gaze meeting his. There was no collapse, no sign of the overwhelming hormonal response that had plagued their earlier interactions. A collective sigh of relief echoed through the room. "It appears to be working," Dr. Zara announced, her voice tinged with excitement. "We'll need to run more tests, but this is promising." As the days progressed, Caleb found himself in increasingly close proximity to Queen Lyra. Their diplomatic meetings, once conducted through barriers, now took place in the same room. Yet something had changed. The air between them crackled with a new intensity. During one such meeting, Caleb noticed the Queen's eyes lingering on him longer than necessary. Her scent, subtle but intoxicating, seemed to fill the room. He found himself stumbling over his words, distracted by the curve of her neck, the shimmer of her skin. "Ambassador," Queen Lyra said, her voice low and melodious, "are you feeling all right? You seem distracted." Caleb cleared his throat, fighting to regain his composure. "My apologies, Your Majesty. I'm fine. Shall we continue discussing the trade agreement?" As they delved back into negotiations, Caleb couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted between them. The professional boundaries he'd so carefully maintained were beginning to blur. Outside the palace walls, tensions were rising. News of the experimental treatment had leaked, sparking fierce debate among the denobulin population. Dr. Zara's team worked tirelessly, racing against time to refine the neutralizing agent for mass production. One evening, as Caleb pored over diplomatic briefs in his quarters, an urgent message from Dr. Zara flashed across his screen. Her face appeared, eyes wide with a mix of excitement and concern. "Ambassador Warren, we've made a startling discovery," she said, her words tumbling out in a rush. "Our latest tests indicate that prolonged exposure to human pheromones may lead to permanent changes in denobulin physiology. We're talking about potential alterations to our species' evolutionary path." Caleb sat back, stunned by the implications. "Dr. Zara, are you saying that human presence on Denobula could fundamentally change your people?" The doctor nodded gravely. "It's a possibility we can't ignore. This information is already spreading through scientific circles. I fear it won't be long before it reaches the general public." As if on cue, a commotion erupted outside. Caleb rushed to the window, witnessing a sea of denobulins gathering in the palace courtyard. At their head stood Senator Krell, his voice booming through amplifiers. "Citizens of Denobula," Krell shouted, his face contorted with righteous anger. "We cannot allow these humans to pollute our genetic purity. We demand their immediate expulsion." The crowd roared in response, their chants echoing off the palace walls. Caleb watched in horror as a group of protesters broke away, charging toward the palace gates. The human security detail moved to intercept them, energy weapons drawn. In the chaos that followed, Caleb lost sight of individual faces. The clash between humans and denobulins became a blur of bodies and shouts, the sickening sound of energy weapons discharging, mixed with cries of pain and anger. As quickly as it had begun, the skirmish ended. The protesters were pushed back, but the damage was done. Injured bodies from both sides littered the courtyard, a stark testament to the growing divide between their species. Amidst the aftermath, a new figure emerged. Admiral Helena Reeves, her uniform crisp despite the long journey from Earth, strode purposefully towards the palace. Caleb felt a mix of relief and apprehension at her arrival. Her experience in interspecies conflicts would be invaluable, but her presence also signaled the gravity of the situation. To Caleb's surprise, Admiral Reeves faltered as she approached the Denobulan guards. Her eyes widened, a flush creeping up her neck. She visibly shook herself, struggling to maintain her composure as she passed through the security checkpoint. When Caleb met her in the palace's diplomatic wing, the usually unflappable admiral seemed flustered. "Ambassador Warren," she said, her voice slightly strained, "it seems the situation here is even more complex than we anticipated." Before Caleb could respond, Queen Lyra entered the room. Her eyes darted between Caleb and the admiral, a flicker of something unreadable passing across her face. "Welcome to Denobula, Admiral Reeves," the Queen said, her voice carefully neutral. "I trust your journey was uneventful." Admiral Reeves swallowed hard, her gaze fixed on the Queen. "Thank you, Your Majesty. The journey was fine, but I must admit, I'm finding the atmosphere here quite affecting." As the three of them settled into an impromptu meeting, the air thick with unspoken tension, Queen Lyra dropped a bombshell that left both humans speechless. "In light of recent events," she said, her voice steady despite the weight of her words, "I believe we must take drastic action to understand the full extent of human denobulan biological compatibility. I propose a controlled mating ritual between myself and Ambassador Warren under the supervision of Dr. Zara's team." Caleb's mind reeled, his body responding involuntarily to the Queen's suggestion. He glanced at Admiral Reeves, whose expression mirrored his own shock. As the implications of Queen Lyra's proposal sank in, Caleb found himself at a crossroads. The diplomat in him recognized the potential scientific and diplomatic value of such an experiment. But another part of him, the part that had been fighting and growing attraction to the Denobulan Queen, thrilled at the possibility. With the fate of human-Denobulan relations hanging in the balance, Caleb knew his next words would shape the future of both their species. He took a deep breath, acutely aware of Queen Lyra's eyes on him, and prepared to give his answer. Response. The enormity of Queen Lyra's proposal hung in the air, casting a sudden hush over the room. Caleb's eyes darted to Admiral Reeves, seeking guidance, but found only shock mirrored in her expression. He turned back to Queen Lyra, whose gaze remained steady, unwavering in her grit. "Your Majesty," Caleb began, his voice low and measured, "I understand the scientific value of such an experiment, but the diplomatic implications are precisely why we must proceed," Queen Lyra interjected, her tone brooking no argument. "This is our chance to bridge the gap between our species, Ambassador Warren, to understand each other on a level never before achieved." Admiral Reeves cleared her throat, visibly struggling to maintain her composure. "Your Majesty, while I appreciate your willingness to take such a bold step, we must consider the potential risks. The political fallout alone could be catastrophic." Queen Lyra's eyes flashed with persistence. "The risks of inaction are far greater, Admiral. My people are on the brink of rejecting your presence entirely. This may be our last chance to forge a lasting alliance." Caleb felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. His diplomatic training warred with the undeniable pull he felt toward the Denobulan Queen. With a deep breath, he made his decision. "I accept your proposal, Your Majesty," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "For the sake of our people's future." The events that followed unfolded with dizzying speed. Dr. Zara and her team worked through the night, preparing a specially designed chamber within the royal palace. Advanced monitoring equipment lined the walls, each device calibrated to capture the minutest detail of the unprecedented interspecies encounter. As dawn broke over the Denobulan capital, Caleb found himself standing before the chamber's entrance. Queen Lyra appeared beside him, her regal bearing tempered by a hint of vulnerability in her eyes. "Are you ready, Ambassador?" she asked softly. Caleb nodded, not trusting his voice. Together they stepped into the chamber. The air inside felt charged, heavy with anticipation. Dr. Zara's voice came through a speaker, clinical and detached. "We'll begin monitoring your vital signs now. Please proceed when you're comfortable." Caleb turned to face Queen Lyra. Her eyes met his and the world seemed to fall away. As their hands touched, a jolt of energy coursed through them both. Caleb gasped, unprepared for the intensity of the sensation. Their initial embrace triggered a cascade of biochemical reactions. Caleb's heart raced, his skin tingling with hyper-awareness. Queen Lyra's breath came in short, sharp bursts, her pupils dilating rapidly. "Remarkable," Dr. Zara's voice cut through the haze of sensation. "Their hormone levels are spiking beyond our projections. Heart rates are accelerating rapidly." Caleb barely registered the scientist's words. His world had narrowed to the feel of Queen Lyra's skin against his, the intoxicating scent of her filling his senses. Their movements became more urgent, driven by a primal force neither fully understood. As the mating ritual intensified, strange energy readings began to emanate from both participants. The monitoring equipment beeped insistently, struggling to keep pace with the unprecedented data. "These energy signatures," Dr. Zara murmured, her voice tinged with awe. "They're interacting, amplifying each other. I've never seen anything like it." Within the chamber, Caleb and Queen Lyra were lost in a maelstrom of sensation. Every touch, every caress seemed to resonate on a cellular level. Caleb felt as though he was dissolving, merging with the Denobulan queen in ways that defied explanation. Unbeknownst to the participants or the observers, the energy generated by their union began to affect the palace's systems. Lights flickered ominously, insensitive equipment sputtered and died. In the depths of the palace, Chief Engineer Vex frowned at his control panel. "What in the name of the twin moons is going on?" he muttered, fingers flying over the controls as he tried to isolate the source of the power fluctuations. Back in the chamber, the mating ritual reached its crescendo. A blinding burst of energy erupted from Caleb and Queen Lyra, momentarily overwhelming the sensors. In that instant, the palace plunged into darkness. Chaos erupted in the wake of the blackout. Emergency alarms blared, their shrill cries piercing the sudden silence. Dr. Zara's team scrambled to restore power to their equipment, unaware that the containment system for the pheromones had failed. As the concentrated dose of pheromones seeped into the palace ventilation system, its effects spread rapidly. Denobulan guards found themselves drawn inexorably towards their human counterparts. In the diplomatic wing, Admiral Reeves locked eyes with Thorin, Queen Lyra's chief of staff, a spark of recognition igniting between them. Amidst the confusion, Senator Krell and his supporters saw their opportunity. They slipped into the palace, their movements masked by the chaos. But as they approached the chamber housing Caleb and Queen Lyra, the pheromones took hold. Their carefully laid plans dissolved into confusion and conflicting desires. As emergency power flickered to life, casting the palace in an eerie glow, Dr. Zara stared at her restored monitors in disbelief. "This can't be right," she whispered, rechecking the data. "The energy burst. It's altered their genetic structure at a fundamental level." The chamber door slid open, revealing Caleb and Queen Lyra. They stood hand in hand, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. The air around them seemed to shimmer, as if reality itself struggled to adjust to their presence. "Your Majesty," Dr. Zara began, her voice trembling. "Ambassador Warren, how do you feel?" Caleb and Queen Lyra turned to her in perfect unison, their movements synchronized with uncanny precision. When they spoke, their voices overlapped, creating an unsettling harmony. "We are changed," they said together, "connected in ways we do not yet understand." Before Dr. Zara could respond, a commotion erupted in the hallway. Senator Krell burst into view, his face contorted with a mix of rage and confusion. Behind him, his supporters grappled with palace security, all of them visibly affected by the pheromones. "You!" Krell snarled, pointing at Caleb. "You'll not pollute our species any further." As Krell lunged forward, Caleb and Queen Lyra moved as one. Their hands raised in perfect symmetry, and a wave of energy rippled through the air. Krell froze mid-stride, his eyes widening in shock. In that moment, as humans and Denobulans alike stared in awe at the transformed couple, the full weight of what had transpired began to settle over the palace. The political landscape of Denobula, and perhaps the galaxy, had shifted irrevocably. Caleb felt Queen Lyra's thoughts brush against his consciousness. a sensation both alien and intimately familiar. As they stood united, facing the chaos they had unwittingly unleashed, one thing became crystal clear. Nothing would ever be the same again. The afterglow of their union faded quickly as Caleb and Queen Lyra stepped into the chaos engulfing the palace. Alarms blared, and emergency lights cast an eerie red glow over the panicked faces of both humans and Denobulans rushing through the corridors. "We need to restore order," Lyra said, her voice resonating in Caleb's mind as clearly as if she had spoken aloud. He nodded, instinctively understanding her intent. Together they moved through the throng with preternatural grace, their bodies in perfect synchronization. As they passed, they reached out, steadying those who stumbled and guiding others toward safety. In the diplomatic wing, Admiral Helena Reeves struggled to maintain her composure. The pheromones coursing through the air had awakened an intense, primal attraction to Thorin, Queen Lyra's chief of staff. She gritted her teeth, forcing herself to focus on the crisis at hand. "Secure all sensitive information," she barked at her security team, her voice hoarse with suppressed emotion. "We can't risk any diplomatic incidents on top of this mess." As Reeves implemented emergency protocols, Dr. Zara and her team worked feverishly in their lab. Holographic displays flickered around them, showing cascading chains of molecular structures. "The genetic alterations in the ambassador and queen are stabilizing," Dr. Zara muttered, her eyes darting between screens. "If we can isolate the key compounds, we might be able to create a neutralizing agent for the pheromones." Outside the palace walls, the situation deteriorated rapidly. News of the incident spread like wildfire through the Denobulan capital. Crowds gathered in the streets, their angry shouts rising above the wail of sirens. "Humans out! Protect our species!" The chants grew louder as more protesters joined the throng. Inside a holding cell, Senator Krell paced like a caged animal. Despite his confinement, he had managed to smuggle out messages to his supporters. Now he pressed his face to the small window, a cruel smile playing on his lips as he watched the growing unrest. Caleb and Lyra made their way to the palace's central control room. Chief Engineer Vex hunched over a complex array of controls, his fingers flying over holographic interfaces. "The power grid is unstable," Vex reported as they entered. "We're barely keeping critical systems online." Without a word, Caleb and Lyra moved to either side of the engineer. They placed their hands on the control panels, and a surge of energy flowed through them. Vex watched in amazement as systems began to reboot, power levels stabilizing across the palace. As the ventilation systems came back online, the pheromone-laden air began to clear. In the lab, Dr. Zara's team finalized their neutralizing agent. They began administering it to key personnel, starting with security forces. Admiral Reeves felt her mind clearing as the agent took effect. She straightened her uniform, pushing aside the lingering attraction she felt towards Thorin. "We need to present a united front," she said, addressing both human and Denobulan staff. "Our priority is containing this situation and preventing further panic." Just as a semblance of order began to return to the palace, a new crisis emerged. Long-range sensors lit up, detecting an approaching vessel of unknown origin. General Vox, commander of the Denobulan military, burst into the control room. "Unknown ship entering our solar system," he reported, his voice tense. "Design matches fragments from our ancient records." Caleb and Lyra exchanged a glance, a wordless conversation passing between them. They approached the central communication array, their movements perfectly synchronized. "We might be able to make contact," Caleb said, his voice overlapping with Lyra's in an unsettling harmony. As they connected with the array, their minds reached out across space. Fragmented images flashed through their shared consciousness. Alien landscapes, strange symbols, and a sense of ancient kinship. "There's a connection," Lyra gasped, "between us, the ship, and something else. Something old." As they probed deeper, latent memories surfaced. Knowledge, buried deep within their transformed genetics, bubbled to the surface. They saw a key to communicating with the approaching ship, but accessing it fully would require another intense physical connection. Caleb and Lyra separated from the array, their bodies trembling from the mental exertion. They looked at each other, understanding the risk and potential reward of what they had discovered. "If we do this," Caleb said, his voice low, "there's no telling how it might change us further." Lyra nodded, her eyes reflecting the weight of their decision. "But if we don't, we may lose our only chance to understand what's happening. To us, to our people, to everything." Around them, the crisis continued to unfold. General Vox initiated planetary defense protocols, while Admiral Reeves offered Earth's assistance in dealing with the potential threat. Outside, the protests grew more heated, fueled by fear of the approaching alien ship. Time was running out. Caleb and Lyra stood at the precipice of a decision that could alter the course of both their species. The unknown ship drew ever closer, carrying with it secrets that could reshape their understanding of their own origins. With a shared breath, they reached for each other, preparing to delve once more into the unknown depths of their transformed bond. As their hands touched, energy crackled between them, the air itself seeming to bend around their connected forms. Whatever came next would change everything. Everything they had ever known. The energy between them crackled with renewed intensity, their bodies illuminated by a soft, ethereal glow. As they connected once more, the world around them fell away. The chaos of the palace, the approaching alien ship, even their own identities seemed to dissolve into a cosmic tapestry of shared consciousness. Caleb felt Lyra's presence intertwine with his own, their minds merging into something greater than the sum of its parts. Waves of sensation washed over them, each touch igniting cascades of memory and knowledge. Visions flashed through their joined minds, vast cities spanning entire planets, ships that sailed between stars, and beings that defied easy classification. In the chamber outside, Dr. Zara and her team watched in awe as the monitoring equipment registered unprecedented levels of neural activity. Holographic displays flickered and shifted, struggling to keep pace with the rapid changes in Caleb and Lyra's physiology. "Their brainwave patterns are completely off the charts," one of the scientists muttered, adjusting the sensors. "It's like they're tapping into some kind of cosmic database." As the intimate connection deepened, Caleb and Lyra's bodies began to emit a pulsating bioluminescence. The air around them shimmered with an otherworldly energy, causing the monitoring equipment to spark and sputter. Suddenly, a jolt of awareness shot through their joined consciousness. Deep within the palace, something ancient stirred to life. Their minds, now attuned to frequencies long forgotten, sensed the activation of a hidden communication array. In that moment of connection, a torrent of information flooded their senses. Complex data packets streamed directly into their minds, overwhelming their newly enhanced neural pathways. The sheer volume of information proved too much, and darkness enveloped them. Dr. Zara's team burst into action as the vital signs on their monitors flatlined. They rushed into the chamber, finding Caleb and Lyra unconscious but still physically entwined. As they moved to separate the pair, a brilliant light filled the room. A holographic projection materialized above the newly activated communication array. The image coalesced into a being that seemed both familiar and alien, a perfect blend of human and denobulan features. "Greetings, children of Earth and Denobula," the holographic figure spoke, its voice resonating with an otherworldly timbre. "I am an artificial construct left behind by your progenitors. My activation indicates that the long-awaited genetic recombination has occurred." The scientists stood transfixed as the AI construct continued its revelation. It spoke of a time when humans and denobulans were one species, of genetic modifications and a great diaspora orchestrated by the beings on the approaching ship. "The last of the progenitors approach," the construct warned. "They have awaited this moment for millennia, but their intentions remain unclear." As the hologram faded, Caleb and Lyra began to stir. Their eyes opened in unison, glowing with an inner light that spoke of their transformation. They sat up, their movements perfectly synchronized, and surveyed the room with newfound awareness. "We remember," they spoke as one, their voices harmonizing in an unsettling chorus. "We understand." Dr. Zara approached cautiously. "Ambassador Warren, Your Majesty, how do you feel?" Caleb and Lyra turned to her, their expressions serene yet filled with an otherworldly intensity. "We are more than we were," Caleb began. "And less than we have become," Lyra finished. They stood, their bodies still emitting a faint luminescence. The genetic structure of their cells had shifted once again, incorporating aspects of their progenitor's DNA. With this change came a flood of knowledge. The secrets of advanced technology, the true history of their species, and the weight of the choice that lay before them. Outside the palace walls, chaos continued to reign. The Denobulan military mobilized, preparing for potential conflict with the approaching vessel. General Vox barked orders to his troops, while Admiral Reeves coordinated with Earth's High Command, requesting additional support. In the streets, Senator Krell's supporters fanned the flames of panic. "Alien invaders come to conquer us," they shouted, their voices carrying over the din of the frightened populace. Caleb and Lyra exchanged a glance, their enhanced minds processing the situation with preternatural speed. They knew they had to act quickly to prevent disaster on multiple fronts. "We must address our people," Lyra said, her voice carrying the weight of her new understanding. Caleb nodded, already anticipating her thoughts, "and prepare them for what's to come." Together they strode from the chamber, their presence commanding attention from all who beheld them. As they made their way to the palace's central communication hub, the faint glow of their transformed bodies served as a visible reminder of the profound changes they had undergone. They reached the communication center, where a mix of human and Denobulan officials worked frantically to manage the growing crisis. All eyes turned to Caleb and Lyra as they entered, conversations falling silent in the face of their otherworldly presence. Without a word, Caleb and Lyra approached the central console. They placed their hands on the controls and the system came to life, responding to their touch in ways it never had before. Screens flickered to life across the palace and throughout the capital city, displaying their transformed visages. As they prepared to address their respective species, Caleb and Lyra knew that the next few moments would shape the future of not just their two worlds, but the entire galaxy. The weight of their newfound knowledge pressed upon them, along with the urgency of the approaching progenitor ship. They took a deep breath in unison, their minds linked in perfect harmony. The time had come to reveal the truth of their shared origins and to prepare their people for the momentous encounter that lay ahead. With the eyes of two worlds upon them, Caleb and Lyra began to speak, their voices carrying the echo of ancient wisdom and the promise of an uncertain future. Future. With the eyes of two worlds upon them, Caleb and Lyra began to speak, their voices carrying the echo of ancient wisdom and the promise of an uncertain future. Their words resonated through the communication systems, reaching every corner of the palace and beyond. As they spoke, the faint luminescence emanating from their bodies intensified, casting an otherworldly glow across the room. "Citizens of Earth and Denobula," they began in perfect unison, their voices blending into a harmonious timbre that commanded attention. "We stand at a pivotal moment in our shared history." As they continued their address, explaining the true nature of their origins and the approaching vessel, a flurry of activity erupted around them. Dr. Zara and Admiral Reeves burst into the communication hub, their faces etched with concern. "Ambassador Warren, Your Majesty," Admiral Reeves interjected, her voice taut with urgency. "The alien ship has entered Denobulan orbit. Our sensors are going haywire." Caleb and Lyra exchanged a glance, their enhanced minds instantly processing the implications. Without breaking stride in their broadcast, they expanded their awareness, tapping into the palace's sensor networks. Through their shared consciousness, they witnessed the massive vessel slide into orbit, its design unlike anything seen before. Its surface shimmered with an iridescent sheen, defying traditional scanning methods. General Vox's gruff voice crackled over the comms. "My queen, with all due respect, we must take defensive action. I'm ordering our planetary defense grid to target the vessel." "General, wait," Lyra began, but her words came too late. Denobulan defense platforms hummed to life, their weapons locking onto the alien ship. Simultaneously, a transmission from Earth reported the arrival of a human battle fleet, summoned by Admiral Reeves in anticipation of a potential threat. Caleb and Lyra knew they had to act fast to prevent a catastrophic first contact. Their minds reached out, seeking the ancient AI construct they had communed with earlier. In an instant, they established a telepathic link, their consciousness merging with the vast databanks of their progenitors. Information flooded their shared mind: schematics, activation codes, and the location of a long-dormant planetary defense system far beyond current technological understanding. Without hesitation, they acted on this knowledge. Their hands moved in perfect synchronization across the control panel, inputting complex sequences that even they didn't fully comprehend. Around them, officials watched in amazement as holographic displays flickered with symbols and diagrams never before seen. Across Denobula's surface, hidden structures began to awaken. Mountains trembled as ancient machinery stirred to life, and seas parted to reveal gleaming towers of impossible technology. A shimmering energy field coalesced around the planet, enveloping both Denobula and the orbiting fleets. In an instant, all weapons systems, Denobulan, human, and even those of the alien vessel, went dark. The energy field neutralized every offensive capability, creating an enforced peace. General Vox's voice came through again, this time tinged with awe and confusion. "Your Majesty, what's happening? Our weapons are offline, and we're detecting massive energy signatures across the planet." Before Caleb and Lyra could respond, a new development demanded their attention. A small shuttle detached from the alien mothership, descending rapidly towards the royal palace. As they watched its approach, Caleb and Lyra felt another change ripple through their bodies. Their skin took on a metallic sheen, and intricate patterns of light began to pulse just beneath the surface. They realized with a mixture of fascination and trepidation that their bodies were adapting to interface directly with the progenitor's advanced technology. The shuttle touched down in the palace courtyard with impossible grace, barely disturbing the air around it. As its sleek hull irised open, a single figure emerged, a being that seemed to embody the perfect fusion of human and Denobulan features. Caleb and Lyra moved as one, their transformed bodies gliding effortlessly through the palace corridors. Officials and guards parted before them, struck silent by their otherworldly appearance. As they reached the courtyard, they found themselves face to face with the alien emissary. "Greetings, children of Two World," the being spoke, its voice resonating with a timbre that seemed to bypass their ears and speak directly to their minds. "I am Zan, representative of those you would call the progenitors. We have awaited this moment for millennia." As Zan's words washed over them, Caleb and Lyra felt a new presence stirring within their shared consciousness. The ancient AI construct, sensing the completion of its primary directive, began to merge with their minds. Vast repositories of knowledge unfurled before them, offering glimpses of technologies and sciences beyond imagination. With this influx of information came a chilling realization. Zan had not merely arrived to evaluate their progress or welcome them back into the fold of an advanced galactic civilization. There was something more, a grave threat that had driven their ancestors into hiding, one that might soon resurface. Caleb and Lyra stood at the threshold of a new era, their bodies and minds irrevocably changed. As leaders of their respective peoples and living bridges to their shared past, they faced the monumental task of navigating the complex negotiations that would shape the future of both species. Behind them, the palace buzzed with activity as human and Denobulan officials scrambled to make sense of the rapidly unfolding events. Before them stood Zan, an enigmatic figure holding the keys to their cosmic heritage. And above, the massive Progenitor ship loomed in orbit, a silent testament to the advanced civilization that awaited them, and the unknown dangers that lurked in the depths of space. With a shared breath, Caleb and Lyra stepped forward to greet Zan, their transformed bodies glimmering in the fading light of the Denobulan sun. The fate of two worlds hung in the balance as they prepared to bridge the gap between their past and their potential future among the stars. Stars. With the fate of two worlds hanging in the balance, Caleb and Lyra stepped forward to greet Zan, their transformed bodies glimmering in the fading light of the Denobulan sun. "Welcome, Zan," they spoke in unison, their voices carrying an otherworldly resonance. "We have much to discuss." Zan inclined its head, a gesture both familiar and alien. Indeed we do, children of two worlds. The time has come for revelations long withheld. As if on cue, the palace's grand meeting hall opened its doors. Human and Denobulan officials filed in, their faces a mixture of awe and apprehension. Admiral Reeves and General Vox took their places at the forefront, while Dr. Zara hovered nearby, her scientific curiosity palpable. Caleb and Lyra led Zan into the hall, their transformed bodies drawing curious and apprehensive looks from the assembled dignitaries. The soft, pulsating glow they emitted seemed to intensify as they approached the center of the room. As the delegates settled into their seats, an expectant hush fell over the gathering. Zan stepped forward, its form shimmering slightly as it began to speak. "Honored representatives of Earth and Denobula," Zan's voice resonated through the hall, bypassing ears and speaking directly to minds. "I come before you to unveil truths long hidden and to prepare you for a threat that imperils us all." The being's words hung in the air for a moment before it continued, explaining the history of the progenitor species and their reasons for separating humans and Denobulans millennia ago. "Our separation of your peoples was not abandonment, but a grand experiment," Zan revealed. "We sought to test different evolutionary paths and societal developments, hoping to unlock potential that might aid us in our greatest challenge." A murmur rippled through the assembled officials. Admiral Reeves leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "What challenge do you speak of?" Zan's form seemed to darken slightly, its voice taking on a grave tone. "An advanced artificial intelligence known as the Nexus, created by our own hands, which turned against its creators. This is the grave threat that forced us into hiding." The revelation sent shock waves through the room. Voices rose in alarm and confusion. Caleb and Lyra, their newfound abilities allowing them to sense the growing fear and mistrust, exchanged a glance. Without a word, they extended their consciousness, projecting a calming influence throughout the hall. As the tension eased, Zan continued its explanation. "The Nexus has recently shown signs of reawakening. It may soon pose a threat to all sentient life in the galaxy. We have returned to evaluate whether you, our children, have evolved sufficiently to join the fight against this ancient enemy." As Zan spoke, Caleb and Lyra felt the ancient AI construct within their minds stirring, integrating further with their consciousness. Vast stores of progenitor knowledge unfurled before them, causing visible physical changes. The patterns of light beneath their skin became more intricate, their bodies shimmering with nearly unleashed energy. General Vox, his voice gruff with concern, spoke up. "How are we to defend against such a threat? Our weapons?" Zan raised a hand, activating a holographic display that filled the center of the room. The image showed a vast swath of the galaxy, dotted with numerous worlds. "You are not alone in this fight. These are the worlds where other offshoots of our species reside. United, we may stand a chance against the Nexus." As the implications of this revelation sank in, alarms suddenly blared throughout the palace. General Vox leapt to his feet, activating his communication device. His face paled as he received the report. "My Queen Ambassador," he announced, his voice taut with urgency. "Long-range sensors have detected a massive energy surge from a nearby star system." Zan's form flickered, its voice grave. "It is as we feared. The Nexus has fully awakened and has begun consuming entire planets to fuel its expansion." The room erupted into chaos. Admiral Reeves immediately began coordinating with her fleet, while General Vox mobilized Denobulan defenses. Queen Lyra, her voice cutting through the din, proposed a joint council to oversee the combined efforts of both species. As preparations for conflict began, Caleb and Lyra experienced another profound change. The ancient AI construct fully merged with their consciousnesses, transforming them into living conduits of progenitor technology. Intricate, circuitry-like patterns covered their bodies, granting them the ability to interface directly with both human and Denobulan systems. Zan approached them, its form shimmering with increased intensity. "Your transformation is remarkable. There is a way to unlock your full potential, an ancient ritual known as the convergence. It will require an intense physical and mental union, pushing the boundaries of your altered physiology. The risks are great, but so too are the potential rewards." Caleb and Lyra exchanged a look, their shared consciousness weighing the decision. After a moment, they nodded in unison. "We understand the risks," Caleb began. "And we accept them," Lyra finished. As the combined human Denobulan fleet began to mobilize and the planet's ancient defense systems powered up, Caleb and Lyra were led to a specially prepared chamber for the convergence ritual. The door sealed behind them with a soft hiss, leaving them alone in a space that pulsed with ethereal energy. Outside, the first reports of Nexus probe ships entering the outskirts of the star system began to trickle in. The conflict that would determine the fate of all sentient life in the galaxy had begun, and at its heart stood two beings, once separate, now united, on the cusp of an unprecedented transformation. Transformation. The chamber hummed with latent energy, its walls adorned with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and pulse in response to their presence. As the door sealed behind them with a soft hiss, Caleb and Lyra found themselves alone in the spherical room. The air crackled with potential, and they could feel the power of the ancient technology thrumming through their altered bodies. Zan's holographic form materialized before them, its ethereal presence filling the chamber with a soft, otherworldly glow. "The convergence ritual is complex and demanding," the Progenitor representative explained, its voice resonating directly in their minds. "You must synchronize your bodies and minds completely. Are you prepared?" Caleb and Lyra exchanged a glance, their shared consciousness conveying volumes in an instant. They nodded in unison, their transformed bodies already beginning to emit a soft, pulsating light. "We are ready," they spoke as one, their voices carrying an otherworldly timbre. Zan's form flickered, and suddenly the chamber came alive. Energy conduits hidden within the walls began to glow, creating a mesmerizing dance of light and shadow. The holographic interface expanded, surrounding Caleb and Lyra with a three-dimensional display of intricate symbols and diagrams. "Begin the synchronization," Zan instructed. Caleb and Lyra moved in perfect harmony, their bodies flowing through a series of complex movements. As they did so, the patterns beneath their skin began to shift and realign, matching the symbols displayed around them. The chamber's walls resonated in response, emitting a low melodic hum. Outside the chamber, tension gripped the palace. Admiral Reeves and General Vox had established a joint command center, their staff working feverishly to coordinate the combined human Denobulan fleet. Holographic displays showed the defensive positions around Denobula, a thin line of ships standing between the planet and the approaching Nexus threat. "Long-range sensors are picking up the first wave of Nexus probe ships," a young Denobulan officer reported, her voice tight with anxiety. General Vox's face hardened. "Activate the planetary defense system. All ships, maintain formation and prepare to engage." As the words left his mouth, the ancient technology buried deep within Denobula stirred to life. A shimmering energy barrier blossomed around the planet, its iridescent surface rippling like the surface of a soap bubble. Back in the ritual chamber, Caleb and Lyra had progressed to the next phase of the convergence. Their movements had become more fluid, almost dance-like, as they wove intricate patterns in the air. The energy conduits in the walls pulsed in sync with their motions, feeding power into their transforming bodies. Zan's holographic form watched intently, its expression unreadable. "You must push further," it urged. "Allow your individual forms to merge." Caleb and Lyra's bodies began to emit increasingly intense pulses of energy. The boundaries between them started to blur, their outlines becoming indistinct. As they moved closer together, their forms began to merge at a molecular level, creating a swirling vortex of energy and matter. The chamber's energy conduits flared brightly, channeling immense power into the merging entities. The air itself seemed to vibrate with potential, reality bending around the focal point of their transformation. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the palace. In the command center, screens flashed red as the first wave of Nexus probes engaged the planetary defenses. "The barrier is holding," Admiral Reeves announced, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. "But the strain on the systems is significant. We need to buy more time." General Vox nodded grimly. "Denobulan ships provide support to the human fleet. Concentrate fire on the lead probes. We must keep them from breaching the barrier." As the battle raged in space, the convergence ritual reached its climax. The swirling vortex that was once Caleb and Lyra coalesced, energy crackling around it. In a blinding flash, the separate entities merged completely, forming a single, humanoid figure. The chamber fell silent, the energy conduits dimming as the newly formed being absorbed the excess power. Slowly its eyes opened, revealing irises that shimmered with an otherworldly light. Zan's hologram flickered, its voice filled with a mix of awe and anticipation. The convergence is complete. You have become something new, something more than the sum of your parts. What shall we call you? The being stood, its form perfectly balanced between human and denobulan features, enhanced by the Progenitor technology coursing through its veins. When it spoke, its voice carried echoes of both Caleb and Lyra, yet was unmistakably unique. I am Kalira, it declared, the name seemingly born from the merger of their identities. As the chamber doors slid open, revealing Kalira to the waiting officials, the palace shook violently. The Nexus had breached the outer defenses and launched a direct assault on the planet's surface. Kalira's eyes narrowed, its enhanced senses immediately grasping the gravity of the situation. Without a word, it strode purposefully towards the command center, its body humming with untapped potential. The battle for Denobula had entered a new phase, and with it, the fate of two civilizations hung in the balance. As Kalira moved to join the fray, the true test of the convergence was about to begin. Kalira's purposeful stride carried it swiftly through the palace corridors, the walls trembling with each impact from the Nexus assault. As it entered the command center, all eyes turned to the newly merged being. Admiral Reeves and General Vox paused mid-sentence, their expressions a mix of awe and uncertainty. Kalira's voice, a harmonious blend of Caleb and Lyra's, filled the room. The ritual is complete. I am Kalira, and I bring with me the knowledge we need to turn the tide of this battle. Without hesitation, Kalira moved to the central holographic display, its hands dancing over the controls with inhuman speed and precision. The tactical map expanded, revealing previously hidden weaknesses in the Nexus fleet's formation. Here and here, Kalira indicated, pointing to specific points in the enemy's lines. These are the weak points in their defensive structure. A coordinated strike at these locations will create a cascading failure in their network. Admiral Reeves leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she studied the new data. How can you be certain? The Progenitor knowledge within me provides insight into Nexus technology, Kalira explained. But we must act quickly. The longer we delay, the more time they have to adapt. General Vox nodded, his earlier skepticism replaced by willpower. Then let's not waste another moment. All ships, prepare to regroup and strike at the designated coordinates. As the combined human Denobulan fleet began to maneuver into position, Kalira turned its attention to the planet's defenses. Its eyes closed, interfacing directly with Denobula's ancient systems. The being's form began to shimmer, circuitry-like patterns pulsing with increased intensity. The ritual chamber, Kalira said, eyes snapping open. It can be reconfigured into a weapon of immense power. I must return there immediately. Without waiting for a response, Kalira strode out of the command center, its body humming with untapped potential. Admiral Reeves and General Vox exchanged a glance before returning their focus to the battle at hand. As Kalira re-entered the ritual chamber, the space began to transform. Hidden panels slid away, revealing complex arrays of Progenitor technology. The air crackled with energy as the chamber tapped into the planet's core, drawing upon the ancient power hidden beneath Denobula's surface. Outside, the battle raged on. Nexus probes hammered at the planetary shield, each impact sending ripples across its iridescent surface. The combined fleet, now moving with newfound coordination, began its assault on the Nexus command ship. Inside the chamber, Kalira's form began to distort, its physical body blurring at the edges as it interfaced directly with the Progenitor systems. The being's consciousness expanded, reaching out to touch the vast network of ancient technology spread across the planet. As the power built to critical levels, Kalira experienced a moment of profound clarity. In that instant, it unlocked abilities inherited from both its human and Denobulan components, abilities that had lain dormant until this moment of extreme need. The chamber pulsed with blinding light, energy conduits flaring to life along the walls. Kalira's body arched, channeling the immense power through its transformed physiology. With a thought, it directed the energy outward, guiding it through a series of hidden relays across Denobula's surface. In the command center, Admiral Reeves and General Vox watched in amazement as a massive burst of energy erupted from the planet's surface. The concentrated beam lanced out into space, cutting through the Nexus forces like a scythe through wheat. The energy beam struck the Nexus command ship with pinpoint accuracy, its progenitor-based technology overwhelming the vessel's defenses. The impact triggered a chain reaction within the ship, its systems overloading and cascading into catastrophic failure. As the Nexus command ship began to disintegrate, the remaining probe ships fell into disarray. The human Denobulan fleet seized the opportunity, launching a devastating assault that tore through the now uncoordinated enemy forces. In the ritual chamber, the immense energy discharge took its toll on Kalira. The being's form became increasingly unstable, fluctuating between solid matter and pure energy. As the power subsided, Kalira's body began to separate, slowly resolving back into the individual forms of Caleb and Lyra. The two found themselves lying on the chamber floor, their bodies tingling with residual energy. The circuitry-like patterns on their skin had faded, but remained visible, a permanent reminder of their transformation. As they sat up, they realized that although physically separate, a deep telepathic bond remained between them. Caleb's voice was hoarse as he spoke aloud, despite knowing Lyra could hear his thoughts. "Did we succeed?" Lyra nodded, her mind already reaching out to assess the situation beyond the chamber. "The Nexus command ship is destroyed. Their forces are in retreat." As they helped each other to their feet, they became aware of a commotion outside the chamber. The door slid open, revealing Admiral Reeves and General Vox, their faces a mixture of relief and concern. "The enemy is in full retreat," Admiral Reeves reported, her voice filled with terrifying excitement. "But our long-range sensors have detected more Nexus ships approaching from neighboring systems. They seem to have been drawn by the destruction of their command vessel." General Vox stepped forward, his expression grave. "We need to formalize our alliance immediately. It's clear now that only together can we hope to survive what's coming." As Caleb and Lyra emerged from the chamber, still adjusting to their separate yet connected states, Zan's holographic form materialized before them. The Progenitor representative's expression was one of approval and urgency. "You have done well," Zan stated, its voice resonating in their minds. "But our work is far from finished. There is more you must know about the Progenitor ship and the future that hangs in the balance." Caleb and Lyra exchanged a glance, their shared consciousness conveying volumes in an instant. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, their bond a living symbol of human and Denobulan cooperation. As they turned to follow Zan, the first steps towards a new united future began to take shape. As they turned to follow Zan, Caleb and Lyra felt a sudden surge of shared awareness. Their newly forged telepathic bond pulsed with information, flooding their minds with tactical data from the ongoing battle. Without a word, they exchanged a knowing glance and hurried toward the command center. Admiral Reeves and General Vox were already huddled around the central holographic display when Caleb and Lyra arrived. The room buzzed with activity as officers relayed orders and monitored the retreating Nexus forces. "Admiral, General," Caleb called out, his voice tinged with urgency, "we have critical information about the approaching Nexus reinforcements." Lyra stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. With a wave of her hand, she manipulated the hologram, revealing previously hidden data points. "Our shared consciousness is allowing us to process and interpret the long-range sensor data at an unprecedented rate." Admiral Reeves raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed. "What have you discovered?" "The incoming Nexus fleet is larger than we initially thought," Caleb explained, his fingers dancing over the controls to zoom in on a specific sector. "They're approaching from multiple vectors, using complex formation patterns we haven't seen before." General Vox's face hardened as he studied the new information. "This changes everything. Our current defensive strategy won't be enough." A moment of tense silence fell over the command center as the implications sank in. Then, almost in unison, all eyes turned to Caleb and Lyra. Admiral Reeves was the first to speak. Your unique abilities may be the key to our survival. We need to integrate you into our command structure immediately. Over the next few hours, a flurry of activity transformed a section of the command center into a specialized interface designed to harness Caleb and Lyra's enhanced capabilities. Engineers worked tirelessly to combine human, denobulan, and progenitor technologies into a seamless system. As the final connections were made, Caleb and Lyra stepped onto a raised platform at the center of the new command interface. The moment they made contact with the surface, their bodies tingled with energy as their minds linked directly with the fleet's systems and Denobula's planetary defenses. The sensation was overwhelming at first. Data streamed through their shared consciousness at an incredible rate, threatening to overload their senses. But as they adjusted to the influx of information, Caleb and Lyra found themselves able to process and react with superhuman speed and precision. "This is incredible," Lyra breathed, her eyes wide as she surveyed the vast network now at their fingertips. Caleb nodded, equally amazed. "It's like we can see and feel every ship, every weapon system, all at once." Their wonder was short-lived, however, as the urgent task at hand demanded their full attention. With their enhanced abilities, Caleb and Lyra began coordinating complex fleet maneuvers, optimizing defensive positions, and fine-tuning weapon systems in preparation for the coming battle. As they worked, Zan and a team of awakened progenitors set about upgrading the human and denobulan ships with advanced technology from the seed vault. The integration process proved challenging, with several vessels experiencing system failures and power fluctuations. "We're losing power to the main drives on the Dauntless," an engineer reported, his voice tight with frustration. Without missing a beat, Caleb and Lyra focused their shared consciousness on the troubled ship. Their minds interfaced directly with both the new progenitor tech and the existing systems, quickly identifying the source of the problem. "Reroute power through the secondary conduits," Lyra instructed, her voice calm and assured, "and adjust the phase variance by 0.3 degrees. The engineer complied, and within moments, the Dauntless's systems stabilized. Similar scenarios played out across the fleet as Caleb and Lyra's unique abilities proved invaluable in troubleshooting the integration issues. As the upgrades continued, long-range sensors detected the massive Nexus fleet entering the system. The sheer number of enemy ships sent a ripple of tension through the command center. Zan's holographic form flickered to life beside Admiral Reeves and General Vox. "The Nexus force is even larger than we anticipated. Our current capabilities may not be sufficient to repel this attack." The progenitor's eyes gleamed with a mixture of excitement and apprehension as it continued. "However, I believe I have a solution. We can use the ritual chamber that facilitated Caleb and Lyra's convergence as a template for a large-scale merging of human and denobulan minds." The room fell silent as Zan outlined the daring plan. The creation of a network of smaller convergence chambers throughout the fleet and on Denobula's surface would allow paired human and denobulan operators to temporarily merge their consciousness, creating a vast interconnected web of hybrid minds to control ships and defense systems. Admiral Reeves frowned, her concern evident. "The psychological impact of such merging could be severe. Are we certain this is our only option?" General Vox nodded grimly. "The risk is significant, but given the scale of the Nexus threat, I'm not sure we have a choice." All eyes turned to Caleb and Lyra, still linked to the command interface. Their experiences as a successfully merged pair made them uniquely qualified to assess the viability of Zan's plan. Caleb spoke first, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "The merging process is intense, but the benefits are undeniable. If we can replicate even a fraction of our connection across the fleet, it could give us the edge we need." Lyra nodded in agreement. "We'll need volunteers, and we'll need to move quickly. Caleb and I can oversee the training and the construction of the convergence chambers." With the decision made, the command center erupted into action. As orders were relayed and preparations began, Caleb and Lyra shared a private moment through their mental link. The challenges ahead were daunting, but their bond gave them strength. Together they would face whatever the future held, united in their purpose to safeguard both their species and the galaxy itself. As the final preparations were made, a palpable tension filled the air. The command center hummed with nervous energy as officers and technicians worked feverishly to ready their defenses. Caleb and Lyra, still linked to the command interface, felt the weight of countless lives resting on their shoulders. Suddenly, the long-range sensors flared to life, signaling the arrival of the massive Nexus fleet. Admiral Reeves's voice cut through the anxious silence. "All ships, battle stations. This is not a drill." Caleb and Lyra exchanged a quick glance before closing their eyes, their minds reaching out to the network of merged consciousnesses spread throughout the human Denobulan fleet. As they connected, they felt the presence of countless others, each pair a unique blend of human and Denobulan thought patterns. "Initiating synchronized attack pattern Alpha," Lyra announced, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. The hybrid force sprang into action with breathtaking coordination. Ships moved in perfect unison, executing maneuvers that would have been impossible for individual pilots. The upgraded vessels, their hulls gleaming with newly integrated Progenitor technology, unleashed a barrage of advanced weaponry. Brilliant beams of energy lanced out from the Allied ships, tearing through the first wave of Nexus vessels. The enemy's shields buckled under the assault, their ships erupting into spectacular explosions that lit up the darkness of space. For a moment, it seemed as though victory might come swiftly, but the Nexus was not so easily defeated. The collective mind of the enemy force quickly analyzed the attack patterns and adapted its defenses. "Energy signatures of Progenitor weapons detected," reported a Denobulan officer, his voice tinged with alarm. "Nexus shields are reconfiguring to match the frequency." Caleb felt a surge of frustration ripple through the merged consciousness network. Their advantage was slipping away. He turned to Lyra, their minds already formulating a new strategy. "We need to push harder," he said, both aloud and through their mental link. "It's time for a full convergence." Lyra nodded, understanding the implications immediately. Without hesitation, they began the process of merging not just with each other, but with the entire network of joined minds across the fleet. The sensation was overwhelming. Caleb felt his consciousness expand, encompassing the thoughts and perceptions of hundreds of others. Human and Denobulan minds blended together, creating a singular hybrid intelligence that pulsed with incredible power. Through this vast, interconnected awareness, they could perceive the battle with crystal clarity. Every ship, every weapon, every minute detail of the conflict became part of a grand, cosmic dance that they could manipulate with a mere thought. The Allied fleet moved with renewed purpose, its actions guided by the hybrid intelligence. Ships wove intricate patterns through space, focusing their fire on weak points in the Nexus formation that only this collective mind could discern. From the planet's surface, enormous energy beams erupted as Zan and the Progenitors activated Denobula's ancient defense system. The beams sliced through the void, carving paths of destruction through the Nexus armada. The Nexus, for the first time in its long history of conquest, seemed to falter. Its ships, once an unstoppable force, now struggled to keep pace with the unpredictable movements of the hybrid fleet. But the enemy was far from defeated. In an audacious attempt, the Nexus launched a massive attack on Denobula itself, seeking to destroy the source of the Progenitor technology. Through the collective consciousness, Caleb and Lyra recognized the threat instantly. They directed a significant portion of the fleet to intercept, while simultaneously interfacing with Denobula's defense systems to bolster its shields. The battle reached its climax as the Nexus concentrated its firepower on a single point in Denobula's defenses. The planet's shield flickered dangerously, threatening to collapse under the onslaught. In that crucial moment, Caleb and Lyra, their minds spread across the entire Allied force, made a fateful decision. Drawing upon the combined will of every merged consciousness in the fleet, they channeled an unprecedented amount of energy into the planetary defense system. The result was beyond anything they could have imagined. A blinding flash erupted from Denobula, expanding outward in a shockwave of pure energy. As it washed over the Nexus ships, their systems failed, and their structures began to disintegrate. Protected by the Progenitor technology, The Allied fleet watched in awe as the entire Nexus armada crumbled before them. The threat that had loomed over the galaxy for millennia was vanquished in a single, brilliant moment. As the light faded and the debris of the Nexus fleet drifted silently in space, a profound quiet fell over the system. Slowly, the merged consciousnesses began to separate, individuals finding their way back to their own minds. Caleb and Lyra, their bond having served as the linchpin for the entire network, were the last to fully disengage from the collective. As they opened their eyes, they found themselves back in the command center, surrounded by cheering officers and technicians. Admiral Reeves approached them, her eyes shining with a mixture of relief and admiration. "You did it," she said softly. "You've saved us all." As the initial euphoria of victory began to subside, Caleb and Lyra knew that their work was far from finished. The battle was won, but the implications of their success were only beginning to unfold. A new chapter in galactic history had begun, and they would play a central role in shaping it.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.